DNA, fingerprints, IP addresses, and so much more to tighten the net.
Technology leaving a trail of clues leading to an accused killer, but ultimately it was a witness tip that brought him in.
Oh my God, it's a guy from New York.
My partner and I recognized him immediately.
Today we're talking with a former FBI agent about the hunt for an Ivy League graduate turned murder suspect. And what we've learned about his ties to the Bay Area.
This is CBS News Bay Area with Elizabeth Cook.
I'm Ann Makovec in for Liz, and this afternoon we are going inside the search for a killer. The CEO of United Healthcare gunned down, the manhunt ending at a McDonald's. Today, we're asking a former FBI special agent, how do you track down a fugitive? And did public sympathy potentially play a role? The Ivy League graduate accused of killing the CEO of United Healthcare screamed as sheriff's officers led him into court in Pennsylvania today. 26-year-old Luigi Mangione faced an extradition hearing on murder charges. He contested extradition to New York, and then we heard from his defense attorney for the first time this afternoon.
I haven't seen any evidence that says that he's the shooter. Fundamental concept of American justice is a presumption of innocence, and until you're proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, and I've seen zero evidence at this point.
The defense attorney said Mangione should be granted bail, but the judge denied that for the second time. Mangione does have ties to the Bay Area. He worked as a counselor at Stanford in the summer of 2019, and multiple outlets are reporting that his mother reported him missing in San Francisco just a month ago. According to the Chronicle, she thought he'd been working in the city at TrueCar, but the company told us that he hasn't worked there since 2023. Jared Hill has more on the mountain of evidence against Mangione and a handwritten note that he left behind.
26-year-old Luigi Mangione shouted to news cameras as he was led into his extradition hearing at the Blair County Courthouse. He's charged with murder and other offenses in connection with the brazen shooting death of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson in the middle of New York City.
Oh, yeah, we pled not guilty, at least to the charges in Pennsylvania. Like I said, I'm not aware of any actual charges in New York. If you were in the hearing earlier, there was a proceeding where they introduced some documents, which, as I complained about, didn't have enough information for me. So we're looking forward to getting that additional information.
Police in Altoona, Pennsylvania, caught up with the fugitive Monday after someone recognized him at a McDonald's.
They asked him if he had been to New York recently.
And he responded nervously.
He was very nervous.
Anna Schechter with the CBS News Crime and Public Safety Unit says charges were filed swiftly based on the evidence recovered on Mangione.
So he had the same fake ID that the person of interest used to check into that hostel on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. He also had a ghost gun that was capable of firing 9mm rounds. He also had those 9mm rounds in his bag.
Casings from those 9mm rounds were found here at the crime scene last week. Now all of the evidence from Mangione's arrest has been turned over to the NYPD. Mangione's felony arrest warrant mentions written admissions about the crime found with the defendant. CBS News has learned he ranted about corporate greed in a 3-page handwritten note. Mangione wrote that the U.S. has the most expensive healthcare system in the world, but ranks number 42 in life expectancy.
I knew him somewhat well. He was a nice kid.
Mangione comes from a wealthy background and elite schooling, but those who knew him recently said he suffered debilitating back pain. Authorities have balked at social media support for the suspect.
Hear me on this. He is no hero.
Mangione was denied bail and he is contesting extradition.
Well, the state of Pennsylvania now has 30 days to get a warrant from New York's governor for extradition. Coming up, we are breaking down the timeline of this investigation and asking a former FBI special agent to take us behind the scenes of some of these nationwide manhunts. Well, today we are talking about how police were able to track down the suspect accused of killing the United Healthcare CEO. We're going to be talking with the former FBI special agent coming up in just a moment. But first, let's back her up and go back to the beginning, how we got here. It all started on December 4th when United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson was shot outside the Hilton Midtown Hotel in Manhattan. These surveillance images captured the moments right before Thompson was gunned down. Police believe that he escaped through an alleyway, then rode a bike to Central Park, where police say he was spotted on more surveillance cameras. Less than 15 minutes after the shooting, investigators say he left the park and was seen on a home security camera. Investigators used drones and canine units and dive teams to search Central Park. They eventually found a backpack that had a jacket and Monopoly money. After leaving the park, police believe the shooter headed to the bus station near the George Washington Bridge, and investigators got a break in their case through a tip from a Pennsylvania McDonald's worker. A customer recognized the suspect from wanted pictures and told the employee to call police.
My partner and I recognized him immediately. Didn't even think twice about it. We knew that was our guy.
He had asked the suspect if he had been in New York City recently, and that really invoked a physical reaction from the suspect. He became visibly nervous, kind of shaking at that question.
Well, that McDonald's is in the city of Altoona. It is about 300 miles from New York City. All right, joining me now is former FBI Special Agent Jeff Harp. Thanks for being with us.
Sure, no problem.
Let's take it back to the beginning when it comes to some of the evidence that law enforcement had off the bat and how they even start a manhunt like this. A lot of it has to do with the fact that we have cameras everywhere.
Well, yeah, we do have cameras everywhere, and you also have a lot of people who have a broad awareness of crime in their cities now, not to mention people who have cell phones and all sorts of social media and everything else. You can, as you mentioned earlier, they did employ some pretty sophisticated techniques to try to, uncover evidence and find evidence that may have been dropped either in the lake, in the reservoir. I'm sure they had canine units and everything else out. But what I find real interesting is it really boiled down to somebody recognizing what would have been in olden times a wanted poster and calling the local authorities and saying, hey, I think the guy's here. So it's real important that we get this information out quickly because nowadays people are going to normally act on things.
Well, yeah. How is that? I mean, we had all these high-tech solutions. I mean, I was kind of surprised that it took them 3 days to even find this guy's backpack in Central Park. Was that a failure?
Well, and again, I don't want to sit here and armchair quarterback what should have or could have been done. But I think what's very, very important is, they talk about all the great police work and everything else. And if you think about it, this person was captured or identified by a person sitting in McDonald's. So it's great that law enforcement went out and was able to ID him and then look at him and go, yeah, that's our guy. But my, hats off to the guy sitting there drinking coffee and getting the attention of the McDonald's employee, because what would happen if that person hadn't have said anything? He obviously had some cash and some documents with him that would have allowed him to travel. But again, at the end of the day, I'm not saying the police work that they did in New York wasn't necessary, because people do things that require sophisticated techniques. But at the end of the day here, it was McDonald's employee and a customer that really saved the day.
And it is interesting. I don't know that I would have recognized this guy sitting in a restaurant next to me. How is it you think that this had risen to such a high-profile situation that his picture was all over the place and that these people did actually recognize him?
Well, that's a key point you just bring up. His picture was all over the place. And thank goodness we have, great media out there that when these things happen, they broadcast it. And again, thanks to New York City law enforcement for getting the camera footage, getting some things out there that we were able to use as identifiers, because some of the photos early on were pretty nebulous. It was kind of hard to tell who he was. And quite frankly, he could have easily disguised himself to not be recognized. He didn't do that. I mean, he really didn't do anything but sit there and whatever he was doing at McDonald's eating and got captured.
Yeah, sitting there eating, not trying to hide. I mean, what do you think is up with that? I would think that if I was in his case, I'd be, in some mountain cabin somewhere.
You would think, and everybody gives this guy a lot of credit about being an Ivy League graduate, a master's in engineering and a bachelor's in engineering and being a genius. Well, definition of genius isn't somebody that sits at McDonald's wanting to get caught.
Right, especially in a small town.
In a small town, right.
But there has been a lot of public sympathy for him. I'm sure you've seen some of the memes on the internet. And, there is something where people say he's sort of a Robin Hood. A lot of people in America are upset about our healthcare system. And then you add in the fact that he's attractive and is an Ivy League graduate. What do you think that brought to the case here?
Well, I mean, you think back to Ted Kaczynski. He was a graduate of University of Michigan and Harvard, and everybody considered him a mathematical genius. And look what he did. And people who are considered geniuses can commit crimes like everybody else. And I think where you draw the line is, do you do something that's legal or illegal, and do you commit a vicious crime like this or not? And my opinion, when the guy took the firearm and murdered this CEO, destroyed this family's Christmas, I can't say enough that there's no way in my mind this guy is any type of Robin Hood, no matter how much you hate the health system.
Mm-hmm. What do you think that he did wrong in trying to escape, besides the obvious not going to a cabin in the woods, not changing his appearance?
Yeah, I mean, it's, everybody's kind of baffled by it. Well, I'm not baffled by it. I don't think he was trying not to get caught. Sometimes, the saying about, hiding in plain sight works, but the problem with that is this is a very high profile case. It's a very high profile CEO. It happened in an extremely large city. It happened, it was a very violent action that caused this CEO to be murdered. And so it was broadcast everywhere. You couldn't turn a television station on, pick up a newspaper or social media without seeing this guy's picture. So obviously people are interested in this kind of stuff. People, love to watch the gory details of a movie and all that sort of thing. And so they pick up on this, and, somebody saw something that looked familiar. And I always say, hey, it doesn't cost you anything to call in a tip. And the worst case scenario is the tip is invalid. But best case scenario is your tip leads to the arrest of someone who's wanted.
Now, there were a couple of days there where, I wouldn't say that it had gone cold per se, but we hadn't heard any real new information except what was left behind in New York, but we knew that he wasn't there. What were the chances of this, him getting away?
Yeah, it kind of surprised me he got as many days as he did on the run. There's too much technology. Obviously, he left DNA trace evidence around, which is, that's great if the guy's been DNA sampled before. But if he is not, then, the DNA databases aren't going to really tell you much unless he's already been in there. Same thing with fingerprints, but at least you're able to capture some evidence that you can use for later on. I wasn't surprised we weren't hearing like all the bits and details that New York Police Department was doing, because they don't put all that information out. One, they don't want to put everything out that they have to tip off the person that they're after. And then secondly, they don't want to put information out there that's going to lead people to either panic or look for something that's not there.
Mm-hmm. Certainly a fine line when it comes to information released in an investigation. A really fascinating topic. We always appreciate talking to you, former FBI Special Agent Jeff Harp. We're going to be right back.
Thanks.
Thanks for watching. You can always get all the latest headlines and weather over on Pix Plus. And remember to like and click the button on the bottom left of your screen to subscribe for the biggest Bay Area news.